Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our
Oh, yeah, just to get the. It's okay, you can talk over the song.
You could try turn off the sun.
Oh, okay.
I'm still gonna shine away, yeah, and tell everyone we're having some fun today. We can go wherever you wanna and do whatever you like. Let's just have a real good time. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. I just wanna spread love and peace and all of my happiness, yeah, to everyone that I meet. Cause I'm feeling spectacular. I love you when we love one another. Give thanks every day for this life, living with a smile on my face. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum.
So Assalamu alaikum and welcome to our fourth installment of financial and legal tools for the Muslim family. And today we are going to be discussing differences between medical power of attorney and a living will. We'll also be talking about unique circumstances you need to be aware of in light of COVID-19. And then also what additional provisions you should consider adding to your directives and legal documents during this unique time and situation that we're going through right now. And so today we have our own Hani Amra, who will be discussing the first part of this discussion. And Hani?
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so Safar, today is such an important topic. We're gonna basically discuss how COVID-19 is really highlighting the critical need for advanced healthcare directives. Because as the COVID-19 pandemic continues basically to ravage the country, doctors across the nation are joining lawyers in urging Americans to create the proper estate planning documents so medical providers can better coordinate their care should they become hospitalized with the virus. The most critical planning tools for this purpose are medical power of attorney and a living will. And we'll be discussing this shortly. Advanced healthcare directives that work together to help describe your wishes for medical treatment and end-of-life care in the event you're unable to express your own wishes. So in light of COVID-19, even those who have already created these documents should revisit them to ensure they are up to date and address specific scenarios related to the coronavirus. While all adults over age 18 should put these documents in place as soon as possible, if you are over age 60 or have a health condition, the need is especially urgent. Before I begin with our topic, I really want to focus on what is that real cost to your family if you don't plan for incapacity. When it comes to estate planning, most people automatically think about taking legal steps to ensure the right people inherit their stuff when they die. And these people are not wrong, but indeed putting strategies in place to protect and pass on your wealth and other asset is a fundamental part of the planning equation. However, providing for the proper distribution of your assets upon your death is just one part of this process. And it's not even the most critical part. Planning that focuses solely on who gets what when you die is ignoring the fact that death is not the only thing you must prepare for. You must also consider that at some point before your eventual death, you could be incapacitated by accident or illness. So, I mean, 1 out of 4 people, you're in a car accident, you are not dead, you're in the hospital, you cannot communicate. So it's like, I mean, like death, each of us is at risk of experiencing a devastating accident or disease that renders us incapable of caring for ourselves or our loved ones. But it's different than death, which is death, as we all know by definition, is a final outcome. Incapacity comes with an uncertain outcome and time frame. So incapacity can be a temporary event from which you eventually recover, or it could be the start of a long and costly event that ultimately ends in your death. Indeed, incapacity can drag out over many years, leaving you and your family in an agonizing limbo. And this uncertainty is what makes incapacity planning so incredibly important. In fact, incapacity can be a far greater burden for your loved ones than your death. This is true not only in terms of its potentially financial costs, but also for the emotional trauma, the court battles, internal conflict your family may endure if you fail to address it in your plan. And the goal of effective estate planning, as we always mention, is to keep your family out of court and out of conflict, no matter what happens to you. So if you only plan for your death, you're leaving your family and yourself extremely vulnerable to potential tragic consequences. So where do we start? I mean, as I mentioned, the first thing you need to understand that planning for incapacity requires a different mindset and different tools than planning for death. That said, we can tell you one planning tool that's totally worthless when it comes to your incapacity. It's a will. I mean, I understand that when we think about estate planning, we all think about a will. But for purposes of incapacity, a will is totally worthless. It's not even valid. A will only goes into effect upon your death. And then it only governs how your assets should be divided. So having a will does nothing to keep your family out of court and out of conflict in the event of your incapacity. I mean, even your own spouse would have to go and basically even your own spouse would not be able to make medical decisions on your behalf, even if you have a will. Your spouse would have to go to court and get appointed by a judge, which means, it's a time-consuming process. It's a very expensive process. So again, although, the laws differ by state, in the absence of proper estate planning, the court will typically appoint a guardian or conservator to make these decisions on your behalf. This person could be a family member you'd never want managing your affairs. The wrong people could end up making these decisions for you if you just depend on the court. Or it could be a professional guardian who charges super high fees. So either way, the choice is out of your hands. And then, like most court proceedings, again, the process of naming a guardian is a time-consuming process. It's very costly. It's emotionally draining for your family. If you're unconscious in a hospital bed, the last thing you'd want is to waste time or impose, additional hardship on your loved ones. And this is assuming your family members agree about what's in your best interest. So for example, if your family members disagree about the course of your medical treatment, this could lead to ugly court battles between your loved ones. And such conflicts can tear your family apart and drain your state's finances. In the end, this conflict actually would potentially lead the court to eventually choose treatment options, such as, for example, invasive surgeries that are the exact opposite of what you'd want to happen. This leads me to a very famous case that we both, Sephora, took it in law school. It's this Terry Schiavo story, which actually Terry Schiavo, in this case, she had healthcare directives. But the healthcare directives that she had were basically generic forms that she got potentially online. It did not really address whether she should continue to receive nutrition, hydration in the event of incapacity. And there was a big disagreement between her parents and her husband. Her parents, on one hand, they want to continue to provide Terry basically nutrition, hydration to keep her basically alive. And her husband, basically, potentially they had a conversation between them, but basically he wanted to end those treatments, which led to a 7-year court battle between the husband and Terry Schiavo's parents. There was almost hundreds of petitions filed in this court case, over 100,000 of court costs, and 7 years. It took 7 years for this case to get resolved. So it's just this is all could be taken care of if you just plan for it properly in advance. So what are the proper tools for the job, in the event of incapacity? Again, the planning strategies basically ultimately put in place will be based on your particular circumstances. It's likely that your incapacity plan will include some or all of the following. You would need a healthcare power of attorney, an advance directive that grants an individual of your choice, somebody that you choose, not the court, the immediate legal authority to make decisions about your medical treatment in the event of your incapacity. You also need a living will, which is also an advance directive that provides specific guidance about how your medical decisions should be made during your incapacity. You would also need durable financial power of attorney. It's a planning document that grants an individual of your choice the immediate legal authority to make decisions related to the management of your finances, such as real estate or any business interests. You also need a revocable living trust, which is also, we discussed this previously, it's a planning document that immediately transfers control of all your assets held by the trust to a person of your choosing to be used for your benefit in the event of your incapacity, avoiding this horrible probate process, which is a court process that we keep talking about. So the trust can include legally binding instructions for how your care should be managed and even spell out specific conditions that must be met for you to be deemed incapacitated. And you know what? So this is really not about wealth. Again, I keep saying that even if you don't have, we keep thinking that a trust is only needed if I'm wealthy. It has nothing to do with wealth. Because even if you don't have any wealth, I'm sure you have some Islamic wishes, some guidelines that you want to honor, make sure that your family is clearly aware of too, that they can honor as well on your behalf. So, one thing that, one of the most common questions that we keep getting, it's what are the differences between the advanced directives and a living will? And basically, advanced directives allow you to name a person known as your agent to make healthcare decisions for you if you're incapacitated and you're unable to make those decisions yourselves. For example, if you're hospitalized with COVID-19 and need to be placed in a medically induced coma, this person would have the legal authority to advise doctors about your subsequent medical care. Now, if you become incapacitated without medical power of attorney, physicians will generally, they would have to look to someone in your family to make these decisions for you.
And so if I may interrupt, sorry.
Absolutely.
This is such an important point, because if someone ends up in the hospital today, for whatever reason, actually, really no one's allowed to visit them. And it could be certainly possible that you may go in not really feeling, terrible, but the progression there of, diseases like COVID-19, but even heart disease and other issues can become significantly worse. And you will have no way of communicating really to get a trust in place at that point in time.
Absolutely.
So today's environment is so much different than even in the past, where people could, they had several days to even talk to the family and come up with these decisions, even as late as, a later part or closer to death. That's just no longer a viable option at this point in time. So everybody really needs to take this seriously. And, inshallah, we'll will be okay, but you have to plan as directed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right?
That's a very good point, because either the progression is so quick that you don't have time to make any documents or an estate plan or will, or what happens is you might be able to, but it will be highly contestable because, if you have a dispute against it, you can easily say, oh, they were not in their, and they did not have capacity to make this document. I mean, it's very contestable, so it would be, it could be in dispute for years later if the beneficiaries, argue about it. Whereas if you, make a will during a time where you're healthy and things are okay, then it would be a lot harder to contest.
Yes, so COVID-19 also affects, has been shown to affect, the brain, as well as cognitive functions. So you're right. I mean, one would easily argue, or one could certainly argue, that the person was not in the right mind when they were making the decisions in the hospital. But the other issue really is, even if you were in the right mind and you wanted to make these decisions, there's nobody coming in to do notary in the hospital. That's not going to be allowed. So you cannot sit and count on, you cannot not be prepared for these kind of situations. And this is not, by the way, going away, right? I mean, with COVID, I mean, we're looking well into 2021. And so that it should be taken fairly seriously, that with you or your loved ones to plan, certainly in ahead. And also keep in mind, this is highly unlikely to be the last pandemic that we see in our lifetimes, for those, inshallah, that live for a while. There are more and more viruses that are evolving, and not to scare anybody, but this is, it's probably going to become part of our lives.
No, and one of the things that we're doing with our advanced healthcare directives in Sephora, we have revamped all the documents. I mean, we had to include minimum of 5 pages to 7 pages just for COVID-19, because there are certain procedures that you have that has to take place, and Sephora is going to be going over these procedures soon, inshallah, and where we have to kind of basically account for. Otherwise, I mean, just the simple fact that even if you have your agent, your healthcare agent would not be able to go to the hospital with you. If God forbid you get COVID-19, they cannot go with the hospital. So they need to have authority basically through, FaceTime, or to be able to make this medical decisions, not just by having this document, or being in the hospital with you. And
Right.
we'll go over these provisions as.
So I'll just let you know that even after vaccine comes out and potentially treatments come out, hospital policies are really not going to change very much in terms of minimizing the number of people that can actually come into the hospital to visit. So all what you guys are saying is very important and very true, but it's not a short-term situation. This is going to last a long time, particularly in the way the hospitals behave. So I think next week, we're doing a full talk on COVID for you guys.
We're looking forward to it.
And update on COVID-19 and what's happening. And so hopefully, you guys will give us once again what you're giving today, certainly in terms of what documents are going to be needed and things like that, because you'll have a pretty big audience, I think, next week.
Absolutely. Yes.
If you have any medical questions, I'm here. I'm just going to stay off the camera.
It's great. We're going to have some for sure. Yeah. And it's, this lead us, thank you, Dr. Sana. We're looking forward for next week, and Sephora will announce it at the end of this webinar. But basically, this leads us to really think about, you need to keep your directives updated. So even if you already created advanced directives, now is the perfect time to review the documents to ensure that they still match your wishes and circumstances and account for new circumstances, as Dr. Sana mentioned, in regards to COVID-19. So for instance, is the agent named in your medical power of attorney still the individual you'd want making these decisions? Has your health changed in ways that might affect your living will's instructions? Are your values and wishes regarding the end of life still the same? And Sephora is going to go specifically about what type of provisions you need to be thinking about, when we now and during these times during COVID, during this COVID-19, during this pandemic. So what's more, whether you are creating new documents or updating your old ones, you should keep COVID-19 in mind. That's a bottom line. This highly contagious and life-threatening nature of the coronavirus is something medical providers have never dealt with before, as Dr. Sana mentioned. And it has really strained our nation's healthcare system to the breaking point. So with this, Sephora, I'm gonna just go ahead and just, inshallah, you can discuss some of the coronavirus considerations.
Okay. So yeah, let's go through some scenarios then, in like how COVID-19 fits into possible scenarios, during treatment, and what kind, how you can address it in your documents, so that you basically design it the way you want it to go, instead of having the hospitals decide for you. So first of all, I'd just like to say to not do it yourself, because when you find a lot of, when you do a lot of these documents online, a lot of times they have a lot of generic language. They have advanced directive documents online, and you could do it yourself, but then they don't really address certain critical decisions, like, for example, the pandemic that we're discussing, and highly difficult and uncertain decisions patients have to make. So then even for like medical treatment, end of life care, you have unique needs, especially us being Muslims in the country. We have unique needs and wishes that can't just be anticipated by like fill in the blank documents. So we want to make sure that our documents are specifically tailored for our situations. And so you work with your estate planner or your professionals, so you can create or at least review your medical power of attorney and living will to make sure it's reflecting what you want. Then we'll talk about, we're talking about open lines of communication, because COVID-19 is so contagious. This is what Sana was mentioning earlier. Because COVID-19 is so contagious, they don't allow family members or any, of those who have contracted the virus to accompany them to the hospital. So this means that your agent won't be there in person to make your treatment decisions, whoever you've appointed in your healthcare directives. And that's what Hani was talking about. And, a lot of times the healthcare directives give broad authority to communicate with your medical providers, and the documents don't totally authorize certain types of remote communication, which is very important these days. Everybody's doing things over Zoom or over phone calls. And unfortunately, even end of life in coronavirus, a lot of times families had to communicate over Zoom. And so to remedy this, you want to make sure that you add certain language to your directives, expressing authority to your agent to that your agent can give directions by phone, by Zoom, email, Skype, FaceTime, and other methods that have allowed communication during this time. And so, you want to be able to bring your copies of your directives with you that have this language in it, to ensure that your agent and doctors follow it, and so it's updated for them.
And also, Safar, I'm sorry to cut you off, but basically this is why we kind of invested in this new platform, new portal that we have established. It's a digital estate planning software, because the majority of times, you're alone in the hospital and you need these documents. Your family cannot have access to it. So we have, basically invested in this proprietary estate planning software that you can just basically give access to the nurse to get these documents, important documents. They're on the cloud, safely secured. So we really also, this is also changing the way we're doing business as well, obviously like many other businesses, but it's very important to have a professional, a law firm, somebody that could actually accommodate these needs that you may not be able to get, have access to, different times. So basically just wanted to kind of mention that.
Right, exactly. So it's a cloud-based system that you would have access to from anywhere at any time, as long as you have your password and use your username and password. And even in a case of an emergency or taken to the hospital, you can't go get your advanced healthcare directive. It would be there, and you could at least show them, and then eventually have your family bring the real copy. But at least the doctors would know what to do, because you would have your, these legal documents there available for them. That's a very good point. So yeah, so there's all these new ways of doing things, and that we have to like adjust to because of the whole coronavirus situation. And so another thing that we're going to be talking about is giving permission to undergo experimental medical treatments, because right now there's all these, even I think our president had some experimental treatment done, but since there's no real proven vaccine, there's no effective treatment, we would have to add language authorizing agent to consent to or withhold consent from any experimental treatments. And that would be up to you. You would decide, would you be open to experimental treatments, or do you want something that's more developed? Because right now it could be, we have no idea when the vaccine's going to come out, a cure is going to come out, if it's going to be available to us. And so this provision would just, really allow us to, even if it's in trial, our agents could say, yes, they do wish to have experimental drugs given or not. And that would be up to you. But they wouldn't know unless we had these documents. Also, again, even further, wishes about intubation and ventilators. These have been talked about a lot, and it's a big thing to think about, because it really affects you physically to have a ventilator put in, and or maybe even put into a medically induced coma, inserting a tube through your windpipe, allowing oxygen to be pumped into your lungs. And so that's something you want to make the decision of, and not the hospital to make it. And so your agent would be able to make these decisions. These are all things that, before coronavirus, we really didn't think of too much, but we're having to now.
And the typical experience is that you don't want, basically you don't want to be hooked up to any machine to keep you alive. And I would say before COVID-19, this has been the case for 95% of the, health care directive cases, because, we just say that we don't want to be hooked up to any type of machine. When I'm gone, it's my time, I want to be gone. But now things changed, and now you're going to go over, basically because there's so many coronavirus patients that have successfully recovered after being on a ventilator, or after basically after a coma. So you want to review your blanket prohibition of any sort of intubations in all cases, to potentially include it, to say yes in the event of COVID-19.
Right, exactly. These are just bringing these issues to the forefront of our minds, and we just want to make sure that it's our decisions and not somebody else's. And even like to consider that if you survive after being placed on a ventilator, you're likely require months or even years of rehabilitation, and you may not fully gain the quality of life you previously enjoyed, but and it depends on your age too. Is it worth it, or is it not? These are all very personal decisions and thoughts, and so you just don't want somebody else to be in charge of it, somebody other than who you trust.
And I read some reports so far. I'm sorry to keep cutting you off, because this is very statistic, and I'm sure Dr. Senna, they're going to be going over it next week. But basically, some reports in New York City, health officials, New York City health officials, that found that fewer than 20% of COVID-19 patients, they ultimately, they survived after being placed on a ventilator. Even same reports from China and the UK found similar rates. So these are very important provisions that you want to make sure you include.
So the thing is, Henny, I was discussing with one of my pulmonologist friends last night. We still don't know this virus. We don't have long-term outcomes of, we don't have data and long-term outcomes of COVID-19, but we'll go over that next week with you. Again, it's not to scare people, but the idea is to avoid it, do the best you can to avoid it, right? Wear the masks, wear gloves, you know, try to avoid indoor large gatherings and things of that nature, because we don't have the data. And for that particular reason, like I said, hospitals for the next 2 to 3 years, I'm telling you right now, are going to keep that policy of no visitation or minimal visitation, maybe by one person or two. It's no longer going to be this free 8 to 5 visitation hours in the hospital. It's just not going to happen. That's going to go. It's gone for a while. So that makes what you guys are talking about, you know, extremely important, right? These things need to be thought about before and acted upon before in terms of advanced directives, you know, and getting the trust in place. And I think we just need to get this point across to our community, our people, our community, and just people in general, in large. This is not a joke. This is something that, you know, of course it's a directive in our religion too. You know, all of these, by the way, when Islam talks about will, the way you really define it is no longer a will, it's actually a trust also. So the way that the essence of forming a will is to give your thought of what you would like to see happen upon your death. It's not just what we think a will is in today's legal terms, but the Muslim will is an all-encompassing, which in today's term, you would be talking about a will and a trust and advanced directives and things of that nature. So I don't want that to be misunderstood as to what the directives in Islam are for this, okay? And I think maybe you guys need to also try to explain things in that term, because people get stuck on just the will.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what Islamic is. This is the will as defined by the US law. That is not the definition of a will in Islamic law, okay?
That's a very good point. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, I'll continue with a few more scenarios just that we should be thinking about when preparing our advanced healthcare directives and living wills. So the next thing is to also consider liability shield for doctors and hospitals, because a lot of doctors are hesitant to honor living wills and work with healthcare agents because they fear that they're going to be sued later. But as long as the language in your directives, you know, is clear and indemnifies medical providers, facilities, your agent from any liability incurred as a result of following your directions, not going outside the scope of your directions, but still, then people and institutions will feel much more comfortable to fully honor your wishes, as long as they understand that they're not going to get hit with a lawsuit later. And then we also want to make sure that everybody knows about or has copies of your directives so that they're accessible. And like we said with our platform, that would, you know, really cover that, because as long as you have your username, password, or somebody you know does, they can access these documents and get them to your healthcare provider, you know, very easily, since they're all digital. They could be emailed right away. So it's just, you know, these are the things we want to think of before we have to, and I hope, inshallah, none of us will ever have to use them, but it's always good to have the, you know, plan there. And then, so, you know, too many, I mean, you know, the risk is very, you know, very
real, you know. So I mean, it's just basically, we just, you know, it's important to have these updated advanced directives in place, you know, just to make sure that the medical decision is taking effect for your healthcare providers to understand basically that you have what your needs are, and it just make it safer and easier for everybody, inshallah. So, you know, whether you have basically yet to create these documents, you know, or you need your updated documents to address the COVID-19, you know, it'll be great. Gladly can arrange a meeting with us as your family protection lawyers. Our goal is to educate the community to make sure that they have the right documents in place, because, you know, we hear so many sad stories, we get so many calls, and when we get these sad calls, it's too late. You know, there's nothing we can do, especially with COVID-19. You know, they're not going to allow, like, you know, an attorney to go and take care of of documents when they're, when somebody is hospitalized, and we have few emergency plans that, families contacted our office, but we were very limited, and it's very sad not to be able to do things about it. But I mean, so we just, inshallah, we pray for our community to stay safe, inshallah, and healthy. And we urge, inshallah, everyone to try to think about these things and just take action today, inshallah.
And we'll take any questions. If you guys have them, you can post them in the Q&A section or just on the chat, and we'll try to get to them. But next week, we will be having Dr. Sana Khan rejoin us, and with Dr. Imran Sharif. And they both have presented on COVID-19 issues many times, during this very special time, risky time. And so they have a lot of great information that we all want to, learn about. So Sana, do you want to say anything about that, or?
Dr. Sana, I'm not sure we're going to have the 2 million audios that you had in your previous talk about COVID-19, but we'll try our best, inshallah. So
yeah, that was a lot of people. So inshallah, yeah, we'll break it down. Actually, give you the latest data and statistics on COVID-19. Dr. Imran Sharif is actually a pulmonologist at the very forefront. I mean, he's been on NBC and Fox and CNN and all that kind of stuff regarding COVID-19. So it'll be very informative. But it's what you're doing is so critical to it that, inshallah, like, this message needs to get out. And hopefully you guys can make it as easy as possible for people to at least do the advanced directives at this point in time.
Absolutely.
Whether they do the trust or not, which they should, but advanced directives are really, no pun intended, but critical.
Alhamdulillah, we have a great process, very efficient process, because we're doing lots of them during these stages. So inshallah,
okay.
We're looking forward to
the good work. Alhamdulillah, I like what you guys are doing.
Yes, so Cornerstone Law Services and Hani and I, we really just want to make this information easy and accessible to our Muslim community. And so please make sure you come back and join us next week, and also let people know about this at Sundays at 10.
Inshallah.
Yeah.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
You could try to turn off the sun, I'm still gonna shine away, yeah, and tell everyone we're having some fun today. We can go wherever you wanna and do whatever you like. Let's just have a real good time. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. I just wanna spread love and peace and all of my happiness, yeah, to everyone that I meet, cause I'm feeling spectacular. I love it when we love one another. Give thanks every day for this life, living with a smile on my face. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Spread peace on the earth, cherish the love that is around us. Spread peace on the earth, treasure the love that is around us. Always be kind, always remind one another. Peace on the earth every day. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum. on the earth, cherish the love that is around us. Spread peace on the earth every day. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum.